Hello and welcome to your Victorian dance lesson for today. I am Marie Walker.
And I'm Glenn Kyle.
And we are so happy to have you join us. Today is going to be a little different than our other live stream presentations because we want you to get up and dance with us. So see if you can find, you're not going to need a whole lot of floor space, but just a little bit. And we're going to teach you a little bit about Victorian dance. So while you're deciding what floor space to use, we're going to talk just a little bit about what we are wearing today. So I look a little bit different, very different than I did yesterday, perhaps a little different than some of the other outfits you've seen me in because I'm wearing a ball gown. And what does that mean? So a ball gown, or even you could have like a dinner dress that might be of this nature, but this is going to be a formal evening attire gown, which means I have a much lower neckline, I have shorter sleeves, and my hoop has gotten bigger because I am wearing a 1860s styled ball gown, which where hoops, large hoops were in fashion. Sometimes you probably have seen cartoons where the women have giant hoops. That has become a fun social distancing mechanism of people in their hoop skirts. So they wouldn't be as outrageous as some of those cartoons perhaps make them look all the time, maybe only if you were at court. But if you were going to, let's say, a formal dance in Atlanta, pre-Civil War, you would probably wear a nice gown, which has a larger hoop. I believe I am wearing about, it's 130 inches in circumference is this hoop. And that's about as big as you're going to find for any type of just normal, wealthy person. Who is not necessarily like royalty of Europe. And then I have a fun overskirt that goes over my dress skirt. And then of course the bodice, which has a point. And then also I can show off some arm and some neck because it is in the evening. I don't have to worry about getting sunburned. And this is just a dress for dancing. One way you can tell if it's a dinner dress versus a ball gown is sometimes by how short it's hemmed. Because dinner dresses, they might have a little bit of a train in the back, which are fancy and beautiful and could be used for a dance. There's nothing that stops you from doing that. But a lot of times, if you're like me and you really enjoy dancing, sometimes girls would, or ladies would hem their skirts just a little bit shorter than like a dinner dress, which would be longer necessarily sometimes in the back. Again, it doesn't have to be, just a fashion choice. Again, do we always follow all the rules of fashion that are set before us? Not necessarily, but some people do. So that is a little bit about what I'm wearing. I'm also wearing little short gloves during this time. Sometimes you see like ladies with the long evening gloves. That's not quite this time period. That's either going to be 1700s, which was before now, about 50 years, or that's going to be late 1800s, early 1900s, which is again is about 50 years away from where I'm wearing right now. If during this time period, short little wrist-length gloves were the fashion. And since it was so far away from the long glove time period, you did not see anyone who was wearing those. They were all nice little short little cotton gloves. So would you like to tell us about what you are wearing, Glenn?
Yeah, so Marie and I have discombobulated the timeline just a little bit today. She said she's in an 1860s ball gown. Mm-hmm. I'm wearing a little bit earlier. I'm about 1830s at the very, very beginning of the Victorian period. There's a lot of holdover from the earlier time periods, the 1800s, the 1810s. Simple long trousers with a drop front, sort of the drop front trousers that button up this way. I have on a short waistcoat, a vest that goes on under the coat. The coat is very tight, sort of form-fitting with a double breast, and it has tails in the back. This is not necessarily a formal coat. This is just a coat every day. What sort of makes what I'm wearing formal are these lacy cuffs here on the shirt and the little lacy part here at the collar of the shirt itself. I just have on regular leather shoes. Some of the more well-heeled gentlemen might have what they would call mules, which are almost like slippers. They're dancing shoes, right? They would take off their shoes when the dancing was about to begin and slip these mules on. I don't have any mules. I would like to get some. And of course, being a sort of middling sort, my trousers, though they may be white, they've got a little bit of stain because I might have worn them for more than one occasion. But Nevertheless, this sort of fashion stays pretty much similar from the mid-1810s to about, like I said, late 1830s. The biggest difference being how these lapels and the collars are going to be cut out and shown. But again, still the Victorian period, but separated by about a quarter of a century, about 25 years.
Yes, but today we're going to be talking about dances that were done all throughout the Victorian era, and then some that were even... So dance is a fun, kind of slippery slope of substance, because we know when dances were popular, when they were published, but that doesn't mean they started the moment someone wrote them down, because a lot of these are like folk dances or derived from folk dances and changed throughout time. So we're going to show you when they were popular, because we know when they were popular because that's when the most people were talking about them and doing them. But they've been like the waltz. The waltz was incredibly popular during the Victorian period in England. Well, yes, the Victorian period, not so much in the early 1800s, it wasn't that popular. We'll talk about that in a second. But it's still popular today, so it's not like it's a one-and-done kind of deal for dance. It's a continuation, I think is probably the best word. I think the first one that we are going to be talking about, and probably the easiest for you to do at home, is the Virginia Reel. And that came from the Sir Roger de Coverley, which came from a pre-Christian Irish dance, and it kind of just evolved out of that. The Sir Roger de Coverley, we believe it to be more popular during the Baroque period, and then we get the Virginia Reel. Obviously, we don't have that name until we have the colony of Virginia, which was founded, and the colonialization of America, and that was very popular. But we're going to show you a little bit of the Sir Roger de Coverley. I'm going to talk through it, and then we're going to demonstrate it, and we hope that you follow along with us. I will be calling the dances. We're going to go over a little bit of the vocab that we have that I will be using during the dance. So I'm the dance caller, and that would have been usually could have very well happened at a number of dances. You have one person who stands up there and tells you when to do everything, because sometimes it's hard to remember all of these dances. Of course, if you were at very high, fancy court dances, you would be expected to know all of these things. And this would be a way that they could figure out which one of you wasn't practicing your dances as you should, and who was who's who of society, I guess, as how well you knew your dances. So they wouldn't necessarily have a caller. But if you're in the colony of Virginia and you are starting out doing your thing, whatever you did in Virginia, plant tobacco or something of that nature, or oversee people who were planting tobacco, you might have one of these because you are not considered necessarily the highest of high society and you didn't have time to practice dance. So the Sir Roger de Coverley is a contra dance or country dance that evolved into a more formal dance, and we're going to be in a set or two columns that would be a real dance. So we would have ladies on one side, and you would have gentlemen on the other, and we pretend that then there's a whole line of us down there, but of course, for purposes of today, we do not have a ballroom full of people. That would be probably not the best idea. So in the set, or in this dance, with people expanding behind us, and for the Sir Roger de Coverley, first of all, you would honor your partner, and to honor your partner, you either bow or you curtsy. So a curtsy is when you put one foot behind the other. I was trained in ballet, so I do like a little rond de jambe, which is like drawing a D on the floor before I do that. And this is the more Victorian way of doing it, is you stick one foot right behind the other. Here, let's see if we can. I'm going to show you my feet. You wouldn't have done this.
Scandal.
I know, right? There we go. So I do a little rond de jambe, and then I go behind. We'll do it from the side view, and then you bend your knees and you curtsy. And with your hands, you either can keep them to the side or you can put them in the front. Would you like to demonstrate what an honor looks like for a gentleman at this time?
There were very many different little details on the bow, but generally, as long as you came up, put your hand down, and bowed from the waist. That was there. Men had a lot more flexibility in the social etiquette of these sorts of things. A simple bow from the waist would do it at most functions.
Yes. All right, so that would be the first move. And then you just turn by hands. And to turn by a hand means you just, if I say turn by right hands, that means we have joined right hands, and then we're going to turn around. Or turn by left hands. You join left hands, and you turn around. And then turn by both hands. Well, you join both hands, and you turn around. And then to do-si-do, well, you pass each other, go back to back, and then come back to place. And back to place means that you have joined the rest of your line, and you have created your lines again. So that's like the place that you started with. That's almost all you need to know for the Virginia reel and the Sriracha to Coverley. Then you would do something called like reeling the line in both of these dances. We don't have people to reel with because you would go down, and these are social dances. These are dances that you would do with these long lines of people, and this is a way for you to greet everyone and to see everyone. So in theory, to reel the line, you would join arms with your partner and go all the way around, and then the other arm would go to the next neighbor. So you would go line of how many ever people there were. We will not necessarily be doing that today. Another thing you might need to know for these two dances is the sachet. Again, we're going to show you our feet for this. And that's just when you kind of gallop. So it's a little hop, skip, and a jump. Your feet meet very briefly in the air. And that's about it. And then you walk. I hope everyone knows how to do that.
Let's pause for just a second because I think we have. Okay, all right, we're back in action.
Okay.
All right, we're back. So yes, I think that's about it. So the Sriracha to Coverley, you would start in your lines. So we would be the head couple because we are the first ones in line. We are the only ones in line, but we are also the first ones in line. That makes us also the last ones in line, which makes this dance a little harder because you're supposed to, the head couple, which is the first couple in the dance, near the head of the ballroom, which would be where the music was located, which would be an orchestral arrangement at this time, because that's all the music you had is either someone singing or someone playing an instrument. There were no recordings. So the head couple would then meet with the end couple, all the way at the end, and then they would dance with them, and they would meet in the middle of the set. So if I am going to go dance with the end couple, I'll come here, the end gentleman, and then we'll meet in the middle, and then go back, and then you would meet with the imaginary end lady, and then come back. With the Sriracha to Coverley, we're going to dance with our imaginary partners here, and as well as with each other. The Sriracha to Coverley goes a little something like so. You, head lady and end gentleman, come and meet in the middle, and then they honor, and then they go back to place. And then head gentleman and end lady, they go and they meet in the middle, and they honor, and then go back to place. And then again, I would go to my end gentleman, and we would turn by left hands, and then go back to place. And then the gentleman would again turn by left hands and go back to place. And then you would turn by right hands and go back to place. Turn by right hands, go back to place. Turn by both hands, go back to place. Turn by both hands, go back to place. Do-si-do, go back to place. Do-si-do, go back to place. And then eventually, the head couple would then reel the line. They would then reel the whole line, and then they would chasse back to the head. They would cast off, which means we're going to walk to the end, and the whole line of people would follow us. And then for the Sriracha to Coverley, we would sashay back to the front. And then we would wait till everyone got back, and then we would be very disruptive, and we would sashay through all of them, and they would raise their hands up and go, wee! And then we would end at the bottom, and that would be how you progressed. And then there would be a new head couple to dance with. Now, as you can imagine, this kind of got boring for all the people standing in the middle of the line because they didn't get to dance unless they were at the front or the end. So the Virginia reel was much more inclusive, and that made it for everyone. And you do the exact same thing, but with the partner across from you.
Okay, quick question. Are you saying sachet Coverley? All right, what was the dance term you used?
Oh, so I said it was a sachet, and the dance is Sir Roger de Coverley.
Sir Roger de Coverley.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for any miscommunication on my part. So Virginia Reel, much more inclusive. You were dancing with a partner directly across from you, and you all got to do something. Of course, the head couple still reeled the line and did the sachet part, and then you all cast off. And they formed a bridge at the end instead of going up and then being disruptive and going back for the progression. So we are going to since we don't have the end partners, but we have a partner right across from us, we are going to demonstrate the Virginia Reel very quickly, and then we would love for you to do it with us.
All right. Would you like music for this? Or?
Ooh, yes, let's have music for the demonstration. I'll still call everything. And then if you want to go ahead and do it with us, if you think you know what you're doing, by all means do. If you would like to watch and then do it with us, we will do it twice. All right. Honor your partners for the Virginia Reel. All right, right hands round. Left hands round. Both hands round. Do-si-do. All right, now the head couple sachets. All right, now it's time to reel the imaginary line. So we arms to your partner, and then other arm to your neighbor. All right, and then we come back together. We're going to just reel once. So you go back to your sides, and then you sachet back to the front, which is right here. And then we cast off. And form a bridge for all the imaginary people. All right, and then we have progressed to the end of the line. All right, so let's try that one more time, and we'd love for you to join in with us.
All right, here we go, back to the beginning.
All right, honor your partners for the Virginia Reel. All right, left, right hands round. Left hands round. Both hands round. Do-si-do. All right, head couple sachets. All right, head couple reels the line. It's hard to figure out when we don't have actual people here. All right, go back to your spot and then sachet back and up. Cast off. And form a bridge. All right, and now you have just done the Virginia Reel. Woo! So that's the Virginia Reel. Very popular. I know I even learned it in school growing up. So this was popular, well, since it came over, the Sir Roger de Coverley, which was a thing primarily in England, and then came over to the British colonies of America, and then has ebbed and flowed in popularity. It was very popular during what we would call the Victorian Era, which, if you were not familiar with that, it goes from about the late 1830s to 1901 when Queen Victoria dies. So this is very British focused. During that time, America was not a British colony, but you have a lot of British people and still have a lot of British influence, or people who really dislike Britain, or people who really liked Britain if they were still loyalists. And also Queen Victoria just became such a popular figure that whatever she did, she was like kind of like the first celebrity, giant icon. Of course, there were celebrities before her, but she was a level of her own at the time, and people wanted to emulate things that she liked. So Victorian era has still influence on America at this time, even if it's just in Britain. And yes, we have a question.
We have a question. So would they normally do the Virginia Reel to a specific song, or could you do this dance to many other songs?
So the question was, is there a certain song for the Virginia Reel? There are certain songs that go with certain dances. For the Virginia Reel, since it's kind of a continuation of the Roger de Coverley, I don't necessarily think I am not aware of a certain song that has to go with the Virginia Reel, because I've done the Virginia Reel to many, many songs, so it works. It works with many songs. I do not believe that one is necessarily one that has to have necessarily a certain type of song. I think you're more looking for tempo and time, and perhaps a fitting of your setting of wherever you're dancing the Virginia Reel. Now the waltz, which is our next dance, does have a certain type of music that goes with it, which is the waltz, which is a 3/4 time measure. So it's 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, and the steps also go 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. So the steps match the music. This, like I was saying a little bit at the beginning of the presentation, the waltz, it's hard to pinpoint exactly when it came about because it's of a continuation it's generally thought of as it's German in origin. It's believed that it came out of some German folk dancing that they think has gone back to at least the 13th century and has then progressed. It then has taken different forms, one of which form would be the allemande, which was very popular in France, and it kind of mimics it's a kind of like a mixture of the minuet and the waltz, because there was actually like hand holding and there's touching, which was a little taboo. And then you have the waltz as we know it, which kind of evolved in the early 1800s. I believe it made its way to the English court in 1816 because the Times wrote a scathing article about how this horrid, immoral dance had made its way into the English court because it had a close hold. So close hold would be what you think of when you think of as ballroom dance today, which is this. And that was scandalous because you were touching. Like you saw in the dance that we just did, that was popular and perhaps had a more courtly appeal from the earlier, not necessarily medieval, but more like Tudor and Elizabethan period, which would be this Roger de Coverley. We're only touching hands like this, and we're still very far away. But the waltz, you know, you had your close hold, which was just awful. People thought it was the end of dance as they knew it, because before this, the most popular court dance had been the minuet, which is when I've heard it described as like a hunter and a deer kind of going back and forth. It's because you dance like around each other with a minuet, and it's very much like we're going to hold our hands like this and dance around each other. We don't actually touch in a minuet. But in a waltz, you do the close hold, which is then progressed into almost all forms of ballroom dance as we know it. So I guess those people were right. It was the end of ballroom dance as they knew it, and progressed into something like this. But it was also, the waltz was considered more like a folk dance because it had derived from that Germanic folk tradition. So it was also, they thought it was like a dumbing down of ballroom dance as they knew it. But of course now when I think of waltz, I think of like the height of ballroom dance. So it's just interesting historical perspective shift depending on what time period you are living in and how you view things, which is just, history is fascinating. That's why we're talking about it today. So we're going to demonstrate the waltz, and then how about we demonstrate it, and then we will teach you the steps that we did, and then you can do it with us. So we would love music.
All right, we'll get that set up for us. Okay.
So of course, before every dance, you honor your partner. And then you would take your partners for the waltz. that was our demonstration of the waltz. So you might have noticed it's a little different from what you might think of like your box step waltz, which is when you go in a box. So we were doing what you would call more like a circle waltz. And a circle waltz is 1, 2, 3, but your feet, let's see, go in a circle. For me, for a lady, it's 1, 2, 3. And then you step out 1, 2, 3. It's a little bit like a rocking horse almost, kind of in movement. We'll go into steps just a little bit more later, so don't worry if you didn't get it quite like that. I'm going to explain more about a circle waltz, which is, if you think of it like it's a solar system, and the sun's the center of the ballroom, and we are the earth, we are turning around ourselves, but we are also turning around the center of the ballroom. And you would have, depending on how many people were there, could be done in the ballrooms of hundreds or in your living room of 5. So, because it was very popular to have like dinner after dancing. You push the furniture to the walls and someone knows how to play the piano and you do a couple dances like the waltz, which was incredibly popular in the Victorian era. And it held its popularity basically until World War I, and then the foxtrot took over. And then that was pretty much the end of the waltz for a while, because foxtrot was all the rage. In terms of couple dances, there was also other more dances you could do by yourself, like the Charleston or things of that nature. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Back to the Victorian era. The waltz was incredibly popular. Circle waltzes is one of, when I think of the waltz, I think of the circle waltz, because that's one of the things that was very popular during this era. So if we're going to talk about the footwork a little bit more, and we'll zoom in on our feet here.
You look like a giant, but here we go.
Oh, I look like a very large giant. I'm growing. Okay, so for footwork, I have to think about this because it's more like innate to me at this moment, at this time. So if I go back, I step back, and then my foot joins that foot, but I don't drag it. So step, step, and then I think 2, 3, and you shift. So think 1, 2, 3, and then you turn. This is probably a very simplified version of me trying to teach how to do this. So if you step back, join that foot, and turn. And then you step back, join that foot, and turn. And then I'm rising and falling, so trying to think. This is releve. So there's also his turn. There's also like the rise and fall of it. So you turn, but you also it's kind of like this gentle rhythm of the partners should look like they're kind of peaking and coming down. If you do the releve and eleve, well, releve and then flat foot. So, and also it's just easier to turn when you're on your toes. So step back, join foot, go up, and turn. That's about the basic. And then the gentleman's feet would look pretty much like mine, but backwards. Let's see if I can do that. I step back with my left foot, so they would step forward. Well, I guess if I turn this way, it's also their left foot. And then they would join that foot and then turn. So then you are turning together. And then going around
without someone with you.
It is.
You want to demonstrate together a little bit slower?
Yes.
There you go.
Are you ready?
Ready?
Yes. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Woo. There you have it. And then also, I guess, a thing I would say when you step out, so like after you step and close, and you turn a little bit, but you also you don't want to go straight back forward. You want to kind of step out at an angle like Glenn was doing, and that it also helps with the rotation. Do we have any questions
We do.
so far?
Okay, so we're wondering what were popular colors for ball gowns?
Oh, that is a good question. What were popular colors for ball gowns? So if you read some accounts, If you were a younger, unmarried lady, you might wear white. I'm not sure how much of that is social etiquette and how much of it, like, that was idealized and how much of that was in actuality. If everyone followed that, or if that's kind of like one of those things we like to think the Victorian era people did. And probably some did, but we aren't sure about how many. Ball gowns, you're going to be showing off at a ball, so you're going to want to have colors if you can afford it. That would show that you were wealthy, which means that you could buy the newest, latest, greatest dyes. So you were probably going to want to have brighter colors than your everyday wear. You're also going to have finer fabrics, like your silk or your taffeta, or something of that nature, because you're showing off. So they're also going to be trimmed more, and they're going to have more floofy things on them, like overskirts or like trim that I have here, which would show that you're showing off your wealth and showing off your latest fashions at the ball, because this is a time where you're going to be seeing a lot of people, you're going to be meeting a lot of people, and you want to put your best foot forward.
What were the differences from Regency era to Victorian dance?
All right, so the difference between Regency era dance and Victorian style dance, there's not like a whole lot. Obviously, the waltz came about like in the Regency era. It was not widely accepted because it was condemned as immoral, and lots of religious leaders came out against it. They were very against waltzing, some of them, for a while. So it picked up steam in the 1830s, I would say, because then Queen Victoria really liked to waltz. I believe Albert also was a good dancer, or at least she thought he was. And therefore, if they did it and they thought that they weren't the Habsburgs necessarily, they were the English monarchs, at least that's what they thought. Of course, her ancestry was German, and his ancestry was entirely German. He was raised in Saxon Coldbirth Gotha, but therefore it was more accepted because they thought like their own leaders were doing it. So that's one giant change. You actually have like what you would call couple dancing instead of the reels that we showed, because you're going to have it's going to be entirely reels almost in the Regency era, which is the people standing in the two long lines doing different types of dances. You are also going to have more what you call dances. So I use the term set for the two lines, and that's not necessarily exactly how you can also use the term set for like the set of three. So like every three people in the line would then also technically be called like a set, and that would be the more formal, more true definition of the word set. And those three people would dance together, or sometimes it was even every two would dance together, and they were much more complicated and much more like you actually had to go home and study your dances so you didn't look like a silly Billy at the ball, because you needed to know these. One of the popular ones, I think in the Regency era, was called the Duke of Kent's Waltz, which was actually named for Queen Victoria's father, who was the Duke of Kent. And that one, it's still a real dance, but there is a little bit more of like, well, you have this many sets of people and you do more like diagonal, instead of just with the partner right across from you, it's the partner across from you and the partner diagonal from you. So it's a little, they get slightly more, not necessarily complicated, because you also have this thing called like quadrilles, which is just 4 couples. So instead of like a reel, it's like 4 couples, but that's also more of a Victorian-esque thing, but also could be done. I mean, it's Victorian as well as it goes back for a long time, because dance is fluid and goes in wanes in popularity, and people add and subtract things from it for different time periods.
How many different dances would a young woman learn during this time?
So the question was, how many dances might like a young woman learn? That's really hard to say because there's a lot of different dances. And some ladies might really love dancing like me. And some people might really hate dancing and they just go to a ball to be a wallflower and just socialize, because you still get to see a lot of people if you just kind of, sit in the corner and talk. Like that's still some people's cup of tea. So that highly depends probably on the girl and the young lady and how much she enjoys dancing, because there's a plethora of dances, so many dances. I would say you would probably almost like you would know the Virginia reel, the waltz, because those are the ones that have survived in popularity to this day. So I could only imagine how popular they were then, because usually things don't just pop out of obscurity. Otherwise, if they were not popular at the time, then we just lose track of them, and they're not necessarily always preserved for history. Sometimes they are, but most of the time, we don't have as much information on them. So because we have so much information about those two in particular, I would say definitely those. I would also probably assume a polka of some sort. I know I love to polka, so I'm also saying which ones are my favorite at this time, as well as what dances they might learn.
Would kings and queens attend balls and dance?
So would kings and queens attend the balls and dance? So they might even be the ones hosting the grandest of balls, or be invited to different dignitaries, and other kings and queens would also host balls and reception for them. They could definitely dance if they liked to. Some kings and queens are noted for their dancing and how much they enjoyed it, and others shied away from it. I believe King Henry VIII was noted for his enjoyment of dancing, and they weren't just balls, they were like pageants, I think would probably be a better word for them, that he would throw in the early 1500s, King Henry VIII, where people would have lavish costumes, and they would have almost type of this court play that they would put on with this lavish scenery that they would just use for one night, and that play would involve some type of dance as well that they would do, and then there would also be like a feast.
Were children allowed to dance, or young people?
So were children allowed to dance? Children were definitely allowed to dance. Now, if they were allowed at certain balls and certain events, that is the more, I guess, tricky question. If you're having, like I said, if you're having like a dinner after a dance after dinner in your own home, well, of course, everyone who's there, I would assume, like, you might invite to dance, or else you might send your child off to bed while the adults dance. So that's very much more of a personal preference, I guess, in how you would raise your children. Some people still don't like dancing. Some people back then also did not like dancing or playing cards, and all thought it was not good. Some people today still think that as well. So it's, again, personal preference of how you would like to. If you liked to dance, if you don't like to dance, if you thought it was a good thing for your child to learn how to dance. And of course, like today, we have parties that are, adults only. And that would very much be if you had like a high society ball. Sometimes it was just adults only. And then I believe, I talked about this in my American Girl Doll live stream. For Mardi Gras, there would be balls for children, which were specifically for children to go to. They would be earlier in the day, and they would be hosted in the same ballrooms that then would host the adults later on that evening. So that's another option, because usually you don't have adults and children dancing together, just because it's really, I've danced with some children before, and it's really hard because you have like this child here, and if sometimes you're supposed to like turn under, you end up doing like a limbo under their arm. So it's just kind of more complicated because of height when you have like small children trying to dance with adults. So yes and no and maybe, I think is the answer to that question.
And to tie one thing into some of our previous live streams, especially Laura Ingalls Wilder, there's a great whole chapter in Little House in the Big Woods where there's a big dance, and Ma and Pa go, they take the girls, and Mary is the wallflower. Laura can't help herself. She's up dancing with her crazy uncle until she falls asleep. So there's a great story for you.
We're also wondering, how often would a ball be held, and where would they be held?
All right, so how often, where, that depends on your society. I think if we're going to go with like Jane Austen or something, sometimes there would be like public houses, which is kind of like, I guess, the idea of like a community center today almost, where you would go and they would have a large room that you could then go and dance in. Or it might be like a hotel would have a ballroom today. They might have like a public event space, you might go and dance there. Some houses, if you were a very wealthy person, would have ballrooms, which is just a large empty space that you could go dance in. Some people would have, like, they had parlors with large double doors that would empty out in there, and the people would just take all of their furniture out and turn their living room into a ballroom. That's another option. How often would these things happen? It depends on what season it is, because there's usually the social season. So if you're having the social season, you might get invited to like one a week, maybe. Or again, it depends on who you are and where you are and what your station in life is. So if you're a high society person, if you're an unmarried lady, these type of social events are a great way for you to go meet people. And if you're an unmarried gentleman, this is a time where you go and meet people, because these are social dances. You would have like a dance card. These were very popular in the Victorian era, as well as some before and after, where you would have a list of dances. So then you knew what order the dancers were going to come in, but there were also lines where a gentleman could write their names in, and it was considered rude or bad-mannered if you took too many dances with a certain lady. So you might just do two, and then if you were to do more than that, it might be seen rude, or it might be seen as you have a very interest in this girl, and therefore, like, some people would start to talk, we'll say, and some things would probably be presumed that there was some type of relationship, or you wanted to be some type of relationship between you. So of course, that's very much high society. If you're at a barn dance and there's only 5 girls, you're going to be dancing with those people more often than not, because you're going to have more than 5 dances probably. You're going to repeat partners. So again, it depends on where you are and what your station of life is. But if we're going to talk about high society and etiquette books, that would be something of that nature. So again, it depends on who you are, where you are. A lot of times dances were held to celebrate things. Like, I think your story of Laura Ingalls Wilder reminded me of a story of Kirsten, where there's like a barn raising, and then they have everyone to the barn, and they have a barn dance to celebrate the barn raising. So if someone was going to have like a birthday or Christmas or some type of holiday, there also might be balls surrounding that, or 12th night or Mardi Gras. Like, large holidays would have balls, but also the social season, which is usually the summer, because that's the time where you're not, like, you've already planted, you haven't quite harvested yet, so you got a little bit of time to go make some social calls.
All right, we have a teenager in the chat. Shania is 14, and she wants to know, what would the experience be like for a teenage girl going to a ball?
All right, so what would, like, the experience of going to a ball be like? Specifically as a teenager. So that depends. If there's a certain point of teenage years where, you know, for us right now, it's like kind of like 16, because that's when you get to have a sweet 16, you get your license, you get some more independence. For them, I'm not exactly sure when that coming of age would be, but there would probably, there's like the idea of being a debutante, which is like your first season of society, and you would be introduced to the public, and then you were a debutante, and therefore you could, you were like the hot ticket, and people wanted you to come to their gatherings because you're, you know, new to the society scene. So that could be an experience for a teenager where her presence at a ball would be very desirable, because she's like a new person, and they want to meet her and want to introduce her to their circle of society. I would assume that it would be very exciting, because you might not necessarily have like a ball gown, so you might get your first ball gown or your first fancy dress. If your parents or whoever you were living with had enough money to give you such things. Otherwise, you might just have to wear your best dress, because not everyone always wore like ball gowns like this to dance. If I was going to a barn raising, this would not be appropriate attire for a barn raising, or to celebrate a barn raising. I would wear probably like a nicer day dress, because you still want to look nice. You're still meeting people, but it's not quite this level of elegance. You would also generally have some type of fancy hairpiece, be that flowers or combs that you would stick in your hair. I have like a braided ribbon headband going on here. You would probably do your hair a little bit fancier. You might wear more jewelry than you might in the normal day, which is all just, it's exciting, because you get to dress up and put on pretty things that you might not wear every single day if you're going to a grand, very fancy ball.
We're wondering, did enslaved people also have dances of their own?
So the question was, would enslaved people have dances of their own? And the question to that is most certainly yes. They might not necessarily be allowed due to the social circumstances to go to a ball like in town or something of that nature. But there were definitely dances held within their own quarters. And they would play their own music. Sometimes these dances were not necessarily look like the ones that we show today, which are very much European in influence, and they would come from their more traditional roots of their homeland, whether that be because you have the dispersa from Africa, so you have a lot of West African cultures coming together and a blending of their cultures and as well as their cultural dances. And that's a way that they could then connect as well to their culture and to their homeland that they were cruelly taken from. Sometimes there were documentations where, of course, they would dance for a celebration if something were to happen that they would like to celebrate. There's also documentation of like them holding dances and playing music when someone was trying to escape or run away, because it would create a ruckus or a distraction for someone who was trying to then escape. So yes, definitely for their own enjoyment, they would have dances for a variety of reasons.
And very frequently, a lot of the musicians at these events are going to be the enslaved folks of African descent who are very, very competent and talented musicians. Those were very much appreciated and valued folks, and they would sometimes travel around the area being the music for all of these different dances. And of course, they would play that music in their own quarters. They would have seen some of these dances. They might mimic some. As Marie said, they're going to bring in some of their own traditional dancing too. So there's not egalitarianism in this, but there is a lot of crossover because of those things.
Are you familiar with the quadrille?
I believe the question was if I'm familiar with a quadrille or a quadrille. And yes, that would be when you have 4 couples and you would stand in a box. And there's a lot of different quadrilles you could do. My favorite's called the basket quadrille. It's very fun, and you kind of march around and each other in different formations and kind of look like a basket and like you're weaving a basket. It's very fun. There's also like the windmill quadrille where, you know, the ladies and gentlemen, they end up going in around in a circle, kind of like a
Yes.
quadrille. Like, imagine there being more people with us, but something like that. Yeah, so there's a lot of really fun quadrilles that were done during the Victorian era and before and after as well.
All right, our last question before we would love for you to demonstrate the waltz one more time.
Oh, all right.
Last question is in regards to dance cards. Would they be filled out prior to the ball or at the ball itself?
So the question would be about dance cards. Would those be filled out before the ball or during the ball? The answer is kind of both. You wouldn't necessarily like get it weeks in advance and then people would be vying for it. But like before the dancing started, when you're all just kind of standing, milling about, that would be a good time for a gentleman to go ask if there's a particular lady he knows he really wants to have a certain dance with, to go ahead and put his name on the card. Of course, if you're not, maybe you're not as popular, you might have to wait until during the dance, and then people might come up and ask you for your card and then fill it out. Or even if you are popular and there's just not a lot of guys at the dance. So it could be before or after, during. That, again, depends on who you are and where you are and what you're doing.
All right, well, we'll conclude there and then go into the waltz again, if you don't mind.
All right, we'll waltz ourselves out.
Sure.
All right, here we go.
Oh, should wait for the music.
Yes.
So-
Oh, sorry, my bad. The band isn't ready. There we go.